What a wonderful. Well, thank you, Deborah. And Deborah, you get to name that lovely woman who, or the voice who gets to say, this session's being recorded. So this session is going to be recorded, but the session is going to be paused at several places. Why, you might ask, am I going to pause the recording?
I'm not going to ask.
Well, Dan, had you asked, my answer would have been, this is what I have to deal with every time my community gets together, Alice. It's like, it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to give the rabbi a hard time, and I deserve all of it. Well, the reason I'm going to pause it is because there are several copywritten things, videos that I'm going to be playing for your enjoyment as well as mine. And what happens is YouTube catches that, and then they don't allow you to post the video as you recorded it because I don't have ownership over these things. And that's pretty good, I think. So I'm going to be pausing it at those times. Hi, Carol Ann, welcome. So this evening, we're going to be talking about how many people you're having at your Seder, how many Zoom screens you're having at your Seder, how many, what's cooking, what you're planning on eating at your Seder, any rituals that are minhagim, that are practices from your childhood or practices that you've established as an adult in your Seders. The idea being is that just like my friend Alice waved to everybody. This is my friend Alice Bayless. Alice is here because for many of us, and rabbis have this issue too. We don't get to go, well, most rabbis who have, real pulpits, they don't get to go to other people's, shuls. And so they don't get to see what happens there, right? But Alice shared with me that she wants to get some ideas tonight and be inspired. So may it be so. So one of the practices at my Sedarim, when the kids were little, well, when Mo was small, and we had other kids, in between the doorway, we would put blue crepe paper. And that crepe paper, of course, would be symbolic of the sea. And right before we crossed the sea, what did we do? We picked up tambourines. And the women, children would lead us. And we would sing this song. When we all reach the Reed Sea, when Havaya split the water, when we all cross the Reed Sea, singing Yah, deliver me. When we all reach the Reed Sea, when Havaya split the water, when we all cross the Reed Sea, singing Yah, deliver me. Maya, Maya, deliver me. Sing that with me. Maya, Maya, deliver me. Oh Yah, deliver me. Singing Yah, deliver me. Hey, Marlena, when we all, you were there with me at the Red Sea. Split the water when we all cross the Reed Sea, singing Yah, deliver me. When we all reach the Reed Sea, Havaya split the water. When we all cross the Reed Sea, singing Yah, deliver. Sing with me. Oh Yah, deliver me. Oh Yah, deliver me. Oh Yah, deliver me. Singing Yah, deliver me. Oh Yah, deliver me. Oh Yah, deliver me. Oh Yah, deliver me. Singing Yah, deliver me. And by this time, the children would have crashed through the blue crepe paper and the water, giggling and playing their tambourines and rattlers, making their way back to the table. Amy and Jay, welcome. Oh, I just heard a door slam behind me. Renee actually is downstairs and she's hosting the grapevine, and I forgot to close my door. So, oi. Let me just make sure it's closed. Talk amongst yourselves. Okay, it's closed now. It's a very busy house tonight. Do you all have a Haggadah with you? Oh, I should have told you to bring one. It might be I think you have one in your house somewhere, Dan, because I'm not going to be screen sharing the texts with you. We're not going to be needing a lot of them, but if you have one close by, it'd be really nice for you to have it with you.
We moved 20 years ago, so there must be in a box downstairs.
It's on the shelf in downstairs in the middle room.
Thank you.
And not to worry, some of this you might know by heart, and otherwise just sing yai dai da dai, which is always acceptable, right? So what Haggadot do we have represented here? Who's got a Haggadah? Alice, I see you have one. What do you have? Let me see. What is the promise of the land? Susan has. And Marlena, the Passover Haggadah. Where's that from? It looks like an oldie but goodie. You can.
This is what I grew up with. It's what my grandfather used at the Seder.
No kidding.
Since I was a child.
He didn't use the Maxwell House?
He used this my whole life.
Wow. How many of us grew up with the Maxwell House? Yeah. Yeah. And it had wine stains. Elliot, welcome. They had wine stains over them over the course of all of those years. That too was a tradition to spill wine on the Haggadah. And any other Haggadot represented here? Mark Grayboys, welcome. I recognize that one, Linda Landis. That's like a Miriam, like a women's feminist Haggadah. Okay, that's what I thought. Any other ones? Carol Ann, welcome. On Wings of Freedom, yes, I believe that's the Reform movement. The Open Door is Reconstructionist, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Linda? And there's another Wings of Freedom. And Alice, you have the...
It's a compilation of 3 Haggadot, and it's very, very old. It's got the original Freedom Seder that Arthur led, and then on from there. This copyright is 1984, but it contains these Arthur's, Grace Paley, Arthur Waskow, a Seder for the Children of Abraham, and a Haggadah of Liberation. So it's nice to have all the perspectives.
Mhm.
And this is the one that our family uses, and I have about a dozen copies of this.
Right,
And
which
it
is...
has some very special things in it. Every time there's music, we have the music pasted in.
Yeah. Oh, nice. You did that.
Yeah. we
Great
did that.
idea. Great idea. That's another Reconstructionist Haggadah, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
This
Linda.
one is Reform,
That's Reform, the Open Door?
and there's music with notation in the back also. It's printed in, not added, but it's
Right.
part of the book.
Great, great. Elliot, what do you have there? You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I frankly have no idea. I call this the artsy fartsy Haggadah because visually it's just a nice thing. And I picked it up for $1 recently, and who could complain?
Excellent. And I'll share with you my Haggadah, which my tradition is to buy a new one every year. Of course, what we use is the one that we have the most of, which is the conservative movement. I forget what it's called, but it's got the watercolor on the front with the C. So this year, I bought myself the Carlebach Haggadah,
Ooh.
which of course has a lot of really wonderful stories. I haven't even begun to crack it, but I am going to share with you 1 or 2 teachings that from Reb Shlomo before the night is over. So let's start from the beginning. Oh, Haiti, I'm sorry, Haiti. What do you got?
We haven't used it yet. We just printed it. This is the Yiddish Haggadah.
Hmm.
It was done by the Yiddish Book Center in Amherst. And so I've never seen it before. We printed it and we'll use it also this time.
Beautiful, beautiful. Wait, there's another one, Jay.
this is not a Haggadah per se, but it's the art of Passover. Some of you may have seen, and it has excerpts and pictures from Haggadah going back to the 12th century. And this is one. This is actually Ben Shah's Haggadah from the last century. The artist Ben Shah, and so the artwork and the selections that are in there really interesting.
Terrific. And one more, Deborah. Oh, in Canada, they had inflation, so they have many different Haggadot.
No, then you can only buy a half. No, I have about 10 Haggadot because I have them from when I was little and I have them from various different things. And over the years, as my the older generation in my family got older and more crotchety, they insisted that the Seder had to be smaller and shorter. And so I got the 30-minute Haggadah. And so I've tried a variety of things with a lot of people who did or didn't want to be at Seder.
So I grew up with the 3-hour Haggadah. My mother's, it was always a tradition for my mother, and some of you might have had the same experience. My mother saying, Adolf, nu, when am I serving dinner? Because my mother would go back and forth between the kitchen and the Seder, right? I don't actually remember my mother ever sitting down at the Seder. And if she enjoyed herself, I have no memory of that. I'm going to call my sister after we're done to ask her if my mother ever enjoyed herself at the Seder. So the Seder, of course, begins with the Seder of the Seder. Right, the order of the Seder, and I'm going to be curious whether any of you have a different melody for Chadesh or Chatz. And I do have the words that are yes, they're transliterated so you can see it. Oh no, am I sharing Chadesh? No. Can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
You can. Okay. So this is the melody we use in our house. Kadesh orchatz karpas yachatz magid rochza motzi matzah maror korech shulchan orech tzafun barech Hallel nirtzah. And I suspect some of you do what we do, which sing it right through, only first the first time, and then you stop when you reach the place that you have arrived at, right? Okay, so if we were up to Karpas, we'd sing Kadesh Orchatz Karpas and just wait for who was going to continue on with that. Now, of course, that is not the only melody there is. Would someone like to share a melody that you know? No other melodies? I thought I saw.
Go ahead, Dan. God, you got to unmute.
Can you tell they're married?
Yeah.
I don't think they want to hear my voice. Oh, okay.
No, okay.
Kadesh orchatz karpas yachat mahakir rakta mohotzi matzah maror korech shulchan orech tzafon barech hallel nitzah.
Lovely. It's kind of similar, but there's a slight variation.
Yeah.
Nice. Anybody else? So everybody uses the one that either one of these two. There's no different. Haiti, how about sing it for us in Yiddish? I'm going to call on you. You're going to have to sing something in Yiddish tonight. You got it? Okay, you let me know what you feel comfortable singing, okay?
You got to unmute them.
Yeah. I'm not sure she feels comfortable right now.
No, I just, we've never actually used this one. So next year,
okay.
Next year we'll know because we will use it.
You know Yiddish?
About it, yeah.
All right, so my friends, We're going to have to back up a little bit because we need to review what goes on the Seder plate and what the significance of these things are. And maybe we can unpack some different things, different understandings. Before we do, I want to share with you something that I'm sure you sense, which is the flow, the arc of the Seder goes from Ganut to Shevach. Ganut to Shevach. So what does that mean? From enslavement, right? From our condition of being enslaved to Shevach, to praise. Now, the praise part happens, of course, at Hallel, but there are a number of mini sections, if you pay attention, within certain paragraphs, really, that are traveling from Ganut, enslavement, to liberation, and to praise of Shevach. And I'm not going to actually hone in on those things tonight, but just to bookmark that, maybe at the Seder you'll notice, hey, there's one of those places where going from enslavement to liberation happens in a matter of a couple of lines, and it doesn't take the entirety of the Seder to get from one place to the other. In fact, in a moment we're going to be looking at the question of whether we should be reclining when we drink the wine, which of course the answer is yes. We've been doing that our whole life. Are you meaning to tell me, Rev Mark, that we shouldn't be reclining all the time? Well, the answer might not be as simple as you think, and we're going to be getting to that in a moment. So let's talk about two things. First of all, what's on the Seder plate? Anybody name something? And let's just, for each other, this is like a warm up, for Friday night. Remember what I said on Shabbos, that in some communities, it is rich, it's customary, it's minhag to read the entire Haggadah on Shabbos afternoon on Shabbat Haggadol. Remember I said that on Shabbos? Why? To do exactly what we're doing, to be familiar, so that when we get, to the first Seder, we're not feeling like, oh, I really have to read the Cliff Notes here to catch up on what happened last year. We all know the story and we all know the feelings, but sometimes, we just need to bring a little thing with us, helps us to deepen our experience. So somebody, Mira Bracha, welcome. I'm not going to call on you because you don't know what I'm talking about. Well, we're even. I don't know what I'm talking about either. All right, Mary Rita, what's on the Seder plate? Name one thing.
Parsley.
Parsley. Okay. So what's it all about? Parsley.
Parsley gets dipped in that salt water to remind us of the tears that were shed.
Okay. So, and why else? What is parsley also symbolic of?
Spring.
Yeah, springtime.
Springtime.
Okay. This is a spring festival. And, but I have to tell you, it's not that easy to grow parsley from seeds, as my little tiny parsley plants will attest to, which have been growing ever since ever since Tu B'Shvat. So we have parsley on the plate. What else do we have?
Roasted egg.
A roasted egg. Is that what you said, Carol Ann?
Yes.
Why?
Well, the egg is a symbol of life.
Ah, okay.
The wholeness around maybe the cycle.
Yes, exactly. Which is why else, when else do we eat round things? We've talked about that fairly recently too. Marlena.
I was just thinking of round challah with raisins for Rosh Hashanah.
Ah, yes, of course, the round challah. So we're looking at the cycle of the year, the roundness of the year, and there's also another time that it is a minhag to eat round food. Anybody? A not so joyous occasion. That's a hint.
Yeah, isn't it after a memorial service?
Exactly. It's after burial to return to the house, a house of mourning, and to perhaps lentils or eggs or anything that is round. Okay. Now this also, one other thing about the egg is supposed to be charred, right? Why is the egg charred?
I don't know.
Meir Bracha.
Because it's roasted so that it's like the the Paschal sacrifice.
It's to remind us of the sacrifices in the temple, right? And so the roasted lamb shank, or the other things that would be roasted, which includes the charred would oftentimes be roasted in the fire pans. Okay.
And we also use a roasted beet because we're vegetarians.
Yes, us too. So what else now? So that's a substitute sometimes. What else? So what are we missing?
The bitter maror, could be horseradish, could be other bitter leaves.
Yeah, it could be chazeret. It could be, romaine turns bitter. And so romaine lettuce is also acceptable. Many years ago, I had Seder at a family, Temani, family, and they would very beautifully line the inside of the Seder table, like right above people's Seder plates, with large leaves, romaine leaves, which just added to Chidur mitzvah, of the beautifying the mitzvah of the Seder. So that might be something that you are inspired to do at your Seder table. All right, we have the beet or the zeroa, of course, the lamb shank. Are we missing anything?
Yes.
What?
Carosa.
Charosas. Okay, so what's charosas?
That's the best part.
Thank you, Deborah. I agree. Now, Sephardic or Ashkenaz, though?
In Canada, they put maple syrup.
I'm going to take it at face value. It could be. That would make it sweet.
I know Deborah didn't say anything, so maybe I'm making it up.
Thank you, Scott. So we had an interesting moment in meditation this afternoon, in which I forget who it was, raised up the just our experience of life, that oftentimes the bitter comes with the sweet, that the sweet rises out of the bitter. And in a moment, I'm going to share with you the poem that I used for meditation today, a Marge Piercy poem about maror that talks exactly about that. And it also made me think of the Naomi Shemer song, Al Kol Ela. If you remember, she said, Al Hadvash V'Al Ha'oket, right? Matok, right. So the bitter and the sweet.
Al Gitenu hatinoket, shmor eli hatov.
Amen, amen. So the appearance on the Seder plate of these opposite things, which if we think of moving from Ganut to freedom, to Cherut, right, or to praise, to Shevach, those are two things that we are holding the entire night. Again, bookmarking and paying attention to where we are psycho-spiritually in the Seder is always an interesting thing to do. And so keep an eye out, especially on any commentary that you have in your Haggadah, to borrow from, and to say, hey, I need a moment here to just read something from the Haggadah in order to really make the Seder a much more alive in that way, and bringing some new commentary into it, and including your own, of course. So there is our Seder plate. Now,
one more thing.
Yes.
The orange.
Okay, Mary Rita, I knew you were going to say that, because you and Dan, of course, written in your ketubah is that you must be wearing orange in public at various times throughout the year. Yes, and so I am actually going to read this to you because I didn't think I could do justice to it, so I pulled it out. You know that the story about the orange on this, is everybody aware? Is everybody familiar with the orange on the Seder plate? Just raise your hand if you're not, and we'll go through it. Okay, so it's Carol Ann. All right, so I think in this whole explanation, you'll understand what this is all about. Okay, this is somebody talking about this custom and how it arose, and the fact that it is an urban legend. All right, here we go. This is the person who is writing about the custom that some people took on to write, to have an orange on the Seder plate. Now, what she doesn't include in here is, well, first of all, she does include that it's accredited to Susanna Heschel, first of all, who is, you got it there? What you got?
This just came from Kesha. And it describes the whole thing in one little card.
Okay, well, it'll be interesting whether or not they describe it as the urban legend that it is.
Okay.
Okay. So apparently, Susanna Heschel has been busy her whole life with feminist issues. And this whole idea of the orange on the Seder plate, arose. The truth of the story is that she came in the 80s upon a number of new Haggadot and also participating at feminist Seders in which a variety of important issues were raised, of course. So the person who's writing this, so she does mention this. The story goes something like this. So Professor Susanna Heschel was giving a lecture in Miami Beach when a man stood up and yelled, "A woman belongs on a bima like an orange belongs on the Seder plate." All right. So we're talking about early 1980s here, right? In order to show that women do belong on the bima, that women have the rightful place there and in Jewish leadership, Heschel and others began to place oranges on the Seder plates. According to another version of the story, the man yelled, "A woman belongs on the bima like a piece of bread belongs on the Seder plate."
Ooh.
And Scott is shaking his head because it sounds familiar, right? But as you know, right, not wanting to place a piece of bread on the Seder plate, Heschel replaced bread with an orange since the incident took place in Florida. The orange state.
Where's Anita Bryant when you need her?
Well, I think she's alive and well in Florida and Texas these days, Elliot. All righty. So she goes on to say that I learned the story of the orange on the Seder plate sometime in the late 90s when I was a rabbinical student, blah, 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 blah. I embraced the traditional symbols. But recently, I found the story I've been telling simply was not true. Here's the true story in Professor Susanna Heschel's own words. And this was written in the Jewish Daily Forward in 2013. At an early point in the Seder, I asked each person to take a segment of the orange, make the blessing over fruit, and eat the segment in recognition of gay and lesbian Jews and of widows, orphans, Jews who are adopted, and all others who sometimes feel marginalized in the Jewish community. When we eat that orange segment, we spit out the seeds to repudiate homophobia, and we recognize that in a whole orange, each segment sticks together. Oranges are sweet and juicy and remind us of the fruitfulness of gay and lesbian Jews and of the homosociality that has been such an important part of Jewish experience. Hello, King David and Jonathan. That's not in there, I added that. Whether of men in yeshivas or of women in Ezrat Nashim. And she goes on to write of the Miami Beach lecture urban legend. Susanna Heschel says that incident never happened. Instead, my custom had fallen victim to a folktale process in which my original intention was subverted. My idea of the orange was attributed to a man, and my goal of affirming lesbians and gay men was erased. Are you following, right? The whole thing attributed to that guy who yells at her. Moreover, the power of the custom was subverted. By now, women are on the bima, so there's no great political courage in eating an orange because women ought to be on the bima. For years, I have known about women whose scientific discoveries were attributed to men or who had to publish their work under a male pseudonym. That it happened to me makes me realize all the more how important it is to recognize how deep and strong patriarchy remains and how important it is for us to celebrate the contributions of gay and lesbian Jews and all those who need to be liberated from marginality to centrality. And Passover is the right moment to ensure freedom for all Jews. Okay, so now you know. Now you know the real story behind the orange on the Seder plate. I'm not telling you not to put an orange on your Seder plate. Because if you did, you can tell this story and how that came to be. Let's change gears a little bit and talk about Hamets or Chumetz. What is Hamets? What does it represent? Anybody? Come on, my friends, not a rhetorical question. And I don't want to see the same hands up all the time.
The mortar, that this, these Jews were using to build various structures.
Oh, no, I'm saying Hamets.
Hamets, okay.
Hamets.
So sometimes people think it's leavening, but it's actually a certain number of grains that we're not supposed to eat, right?
Correct.
I don't remember how many or exactly which ones they are, like wheat and oats and spelt and something else, right?
Right.
Well, we're not supposed to eat it unless we make it into matzah.
Exactly, but it is leavening as well. And this is where we find the connection between, or one connection between Pesach and Yom Kippur. Does anybody have a sense of where I'm going with this? Leavening. Well, besides the fact that we prepare, we spend at least a couple of weeks preparing for Pesach, and equally that amount of time during Elul, doing Cheshbon HaNefesh for Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, for Yamim Noraim. How are we supposed? What is the connection between Pesach and Hamets and Yom Kippur? Go ahead, take a shot, Dan.
Humility, being puffed up, ego.
Bingo. Right, exactly. So the to enter into a state of deep anava, of deep humility, allows us to receive, for our kli, our vessel, to be as pure as possible. Of course, on Yom Kippur, that's of utmost importance. We don't eat, and so we are mimicking the angels, and at the same time spending our day in praise and return. So Hamets and the intentionality that we must have both in cleaning, and Renee likes to call cleaning for Pesach Jewish ritual as obsessive compulsive behavior, because this is the way she really gets into the holiday, is that deep cleaning. There is one connection between Pesach, or two, the amount of preparation that it takes between Pesach and Yom Kippur, as well as just being aware of when our, like Dan, you say, when our ego puffs up, right? When we are talking from that place of baggage, where our story, which is important to us, it dictates our behavior in ways that are detrimental to our return, to our neshama, tahara, right? To our state of purity. So there's just a little bit of a Hamets. We clean our homes, we clean our houses, we clean our hearts. So, any questions, any comments, any reflections, any teachings that you want to share at this time that inspired by what we've talked about so far? And then I've got my first treat for the night, which I've got my good friends here from the Maccabees to help me out tonight. Carol Ann, what you got?
Well, this will probably turn off a lot of people in this room, but
that's a wonderful prelude to what you're about.
I know. It's sort of helping me get through it, because, until my mother would make a Seder, and your memory of your mom running in and out of the kitchen came to my mind. But at some point she went back to teaching, and it was so hard for her to prepare a proper set, not just, to get ready for Passover, changing all the closet, the dishes, all of that work, even though she had household help. So guess what we did? We went to the Catskills, and these marvelous, there were several hotels even including the Concord, but even smaller, more, comfy ones, would offer a week away of Passover. And it was kosher. And we occasionally we usually did go with relatives. Other aunts and uncles would join us. So it wasn't that intimate, because there was some rabbi in a big ballroom saying, okay, now turn to page 8, blah, blah. But just being with these cousins and my aunt and uncle and seeing my mother so relaxed, that's the part I wanted to share.
That's beautiful.
She really loved that holiday.
Well, Carol Ann, I think and most of you know that I spent many a Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Pesach at Grossinger's.
I didn't know.
Yes, I was in that choir the cantor and rabbi that you were just disparaging. So no, I'm kidding. Yeah, I mean, that was my experience. And the food at Grossinger's, ooh la la, so it couldn't be beat. And then the boys, the families would stay during Chol HaMoed in we had a little house kind of like all to ourselves. And we had a run of Grossinger's for the entire time. And then so that we were there the last 2 days. My dad would return to the city to work. And there were some melodies that I sing still from those days, including my Shechianu that many of you have heard. It's not my Shechianu, but and you've heard other people do it as well. Elliot, what were you going to add?
It was before we leave the topic of Hamets. I was going to ask if we could talk about rice. My Sephardic Mizrahi friend Davud Sedekadfar informed me that the only reason rice is not eaten on Pesach is for fear that there might be an errant grain of chametz in it. And I wanted to ask if that's accurate or if there's some intrinsic reason why the Ashkenazi don't eat rice.
Because potatoes were so plentiful.
No, it works for vodka, not so much for Pesach.
Well, there's different answers, and that's one of them. Another answer is that for fear that rice could be broken down into flour and used.
But you're not breaking it. If you eat rice, you're not breaking it into flour.
It's all, well, listen, if the conservative movement tells us that it's okay to eat kitniot, right? And so our practice is we don't eat it for the Seder, but once the first days are over, we will eat kitniot. And why do we do that? Because maybe we'll have some people at a Seder whose practice it is not to eat kitniot. I don't know enough about that to really answer more fully, except for that it's maybe we could chalk that up to an urban legend too. It was at one time, and then it remained so because that became the minhag, not to do certain things, right? And which we're going to get to with the 4 cups of wine as promised. Any other questions or comments? Dan, sorry, I can't answer more fully than that. If you want to Google why we're talking and come in with a more extensive explanation, I'd welcome that for sure. Dan.
Yeah, I was just, my sister-in-law's family is Greek, and so they follow Sephardic rules. And our family is Ashkenazi. And so there was always this question about what rules do we follow? The Sephardic rules where you can eat all those different things, rice, beans, peas, legumes, everything like that. And the Ashkenazi, which you can't. I don't know. I make up that the Ashkenazi just wanted to broaden the restriction just because they could. But, the rabbis doing that, but it always makes for interesting discussion and fighting at the beginning of our Seder. Yeah, for sure. And you say that in jest about the rules, the halacha over these things, but it's in a way similar to why the machzor is so fat is because once it goes in, it never comes out, right? A piece of liturgy, a piyut, a liturgical poem. And it's, again, possible that this started
somehow, and then it just carried over and through Eastern Europe, and no one knows why, but we do it because it's minhag. Deborah.
My sister-in-law is Sephardic as well, and so it would have been 5 years ago I was in Montreal for the Seder, and her parents were there, and they held a traditional Sephardic Seder. It's not only about the food, there are other traditions that they have, and some of them are really quite beautiful.
Yeah, there's even a Sephardic Seder for Rosh Hashanah.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, they do something after,
Yeah.
right after.
And it's very, very lovely. Very lovely. All righty. How about, unless anybody, yeah, Alice, go ahead.
We actually start our Seder with Flori Jagoda in mind. And my sister usually sings Purim, Purim, Purim Lano, Pesach, Pesach Alamana. So we honor Flori in that way, and we bring the calendar along with it, and it helps get into the evolution of time between Purim and Pesach.
Yeah, beautiful. And thank you for sharing that, Alice. So maybe I'm going to do that this year. I was listening to a podcast. I think it was out of Pardes, in which the teacher was talking about 3 themes that are woven through the Seder. And one of them, he makes the point about time, like you just mentioned, Alice. And he points to, which always got my attention as to why the very first mitzvah, the very first tzivui, commandment, instruction in Torah, anybody know what it is? It's kind of like a curious thing. And when he points it out, it makes sense as to why it is given to Bnei Israel upon Yetziat Mitzrayim, upon leaving Egypt. Anybody remember what the very first mitzvah is? The very first mitzvah is the mitzvah of counting time through the new month, which means setting a calendar. A slave, of course, time is not his or her, it's not their own, right? They are not in control of the way that they spend their days. And so when he put it that way, it made a lot of sense to me that the very first mitzvah should be the mitzvah of setting yourself a calendar and observing or celebrating, the cycle of the year around those months changing from month to month, right? Those new moons, which is something that a person who is not free cannot do. So thank you, Alice, for reminding me of that teaching. And now I think I'm gonna honor Flori too. Flori Jagoda, blessed memory, the voice of Sephardic music, born in Sarajevo, and the composer of a lot of music that I'm sure you all have sung from time to time, especially at Hanukkah. Una candelica, dos candelicas, right? And a friend of Alice's, very close friend of Alice and her family. So without further ado, a lot of fours. Remember what we did last week? We talked about the number of times the number 4 is mentioned in the Seder. So the very first thing I need to do is, thank you, ma'am. I really appreciate your help there with everything.
That was the first time I've ever seen matzah used as a percussion instrument. I didn't hear the parsley though. They didn't pick that up.
Yeah, they should have had the parsley a little bit louder.
They needed a mic for the parsley.
The wine glasses sure were shrill.
Yeah. Yeah, Linda.
A group called 613 on Monday just released a new video, a Billy Joel Passover. And they wrote lyrics to the tunes, several tunes of Billy Joel's. It's really, really creative.
Yeah, I saw it too. It's amazing.
Do you get
Pretty
to it?
fun. There's no end of creativity on the internet. People
May
who,
I find it and post the link?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Alrighty. So I mentioned before about the fours and the 4 cups of wine. And so I want to share with you teaching from the Talmud. I'm going to have to share my screen because that's the way I prepared. All right, everybody see that? I'm calling this a second look at reclining for all 4 cups. And where this arises from and whether we should be taking this for granted. All right, Yayin. Itmar mishmei de Rav Nachman. So, Yayin. This is what the subject is. It was stated in the name of Rav Nachman, right? Tzarich hasiba v'itmar mishmei de Rav Nachman. Ein tzarich hasiba. So, the first part is saying, tzarich hasiba. You need to recline while drinking the wine. And then in the very next line of the Talmud, right? This is in the Mishnah because the Gemara is going to really expand upon what the heck he seems to be talking out of both sides of his mouth. It was stated in the name of Rav Nachman that wine requires reclining. It was also stated in the name of Rav Nachman that wine does not require reclining. Okay. So the Gemara explains, V'la pliga, okay? And these 2 statements, la pliga, they do not disagree with each other. Wait a second. Well, here we need to realize and acknowledge what the Gemara attempts to do is to reconcile what seems to be 2 diametrically opposed statements. And this is what the Gemara says. This statement, right, refers to the first 2 cups, and that statement refers to the last 2 cups. In other words, that the first part, the very first time Rav Nachman says you need to recline, that refers to the first 2 cups. And the second, and when he says that you don't have to recline, that refers to the last 2 cups. However, they do acknowledge, they do admit it was not clear which 2 cups require reclining according to Rav Nachman, right? Some say it in this manner. Now, notice that some of the words are bolded. The words that are bolded are the words that are lifted right out of the text. The words that are not in bold are words that are added to the text so that we can know what the heck they're talking about, okay? Because the text is written in very sparse language. So some say it in this manner, that the first 2 cups require reclining, as it is now that freedom begins, since reclining is a sign of freedom. While discussing the exodus from Egypt, it is appropriate to drink while reclining. By contrast, the last 2 cups do not require reclining because what was already was. In other words, by this point, one has completed the discussion of the exodus and has reached the latter stages of the Seder. Alrighty, so we've gotten along, and if we begin with understanding that this is we're talking about the exodus from Egypt, of course, we're in a state of liberation. We should be reclining. And so the second part, he must have been talking about that we shouldn't be reclining. But then the Gemara does as the Gemara is wont to do. And some say, okay, yeah, everybody go like this. And some say in that matter and claim on the contrary. The last 2 cups require reclining, as it is at that time that there is freedom. Before I said we move from gnut to shevach, from enslavement to liberation. If that indeed is the arc of the entire Seder, it makes more sense not to be reclining for the first 2 cups and to be reclining for the second 2 cups. However, the first 2 cups do not require reclining, as one still says, avadim hayinu, we were slaves. All righty. These and those, this is the way they come down. These and those require reclining. Last two, after the meal, we sing Hallel. No reclining, a reenactment demonstrated through not reclining a taste of enslavement, focusing on ganut, degradation. So in other words, what they're saying, if you start reclining, you should continue reclining. All right, you already set the, you've established reclining from the beginning. Don't go from Shevach to Ganut. Don't go in the opposite direction that we all want to go. If you're already reclining at the beginning, stay reclining. But if you don't want to recline at the beginning, that's okay. All righty. So this is a wonderful way in which the Gemara reconciles what seems to be on the surface contradictory statements. All right, let's stop there before I move on. And so you might want to experiment with that and see how it feels. You know, at your Seder, you're going to look in your Haggadah and it's going to say recline. But now this year you can say, oh, you know what? Rav Nachman says in Pesachim, and then you can confuse everybody as much as I confused you just now. All right. So there is another possible thing to bring to your Seder. Anybody have anything before I move on? All right. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Where is this screen? There it is. Okay. Look where I've got the nice little musical notes. I put the musical notes before Bechol Dor Vador. That section talks about in each and every generation, a person is obligated to see him or herself as if she or he left Egypt. Alrighty. So here's a melody that I want to share with you that I learned from Rabbi Daniel Siegel, who was Reb Zalman of blessed memory's first musmach, his first person that he gave ordination to. Reb Daniel is also the cousin of Esther Siegel, of many of you know, is married to Mike Tabor of Tacoma Park and a Jewish farmer. So here's the melody that Reb Daniel taught me. Bechol dor vador, bechol dor vador, chayav adam lirot et atzmo. Bechol dor vador, bechol dor vador, chayav adam lirot et atzmo. Ki ilu hu yatsa, Mi Mitzrayim, Ke'ilu hu yatsa, Mi Mitzrayim. Isn't that nice? Anybody have different melody? There are different melodies. It's not the one I grew up with, but I can no longer remember what that was because we've used this one for so long. All righty. So I'm going to go back to the screen share to share with you a little wordplay and perhaps disagreement as to what the original text might have read. The Rambam, Maimonides, he says, don't read Chayav Adam Lirot, that a person is obligated to see himself, because that is only in one's thoughts, in one's imagination. But Chayav Adam Laharot, which is asking of us to act out the story we are telling, Ke'ilu hu yatsav mi Mitzrayim, as if it was us. What does that mean? Of course, it leads to the minhag of many people to dress up, right, as different characters, or to break into groups and to come up on the spot with, a new interpretation or telling of a part of the Seder, maybe a new poem, a new song, sometimes what we'll do at our Seder, a movement and a word that symbolic of this particular part of the Seder, of imagining as if we came out. Has anybody grown up? Did anybody grow up with? Did anybody ever experience, walking around? I'm leaving Egypt and I'm carrying with me, and sometimes the kids are carrying knapsacks. Does this sound familiar to anybody? That is laharot et atzmo, to really showing as if we were leaving Egypt. It's not just a mind game, right? And so, again, it's another invitation, I think, for us to expand upon the telling, which, of course, is something we are all the more praiseworthy if we expand upon the telling by adding in our own unique ways, living in the 21st century through the lens that we are seeing the world and seeing the Seder and seeing our history in. So I want to ask when I thought of it, I thought it was a fairly provocative question, but certainly a question that's room for thought. So we just talked about reclining. How often do we recline for all four? Do we not recline for the first two, recline for the last two? We recline for all four. Because why? As we talked about in the beginning, reclining is a symbolic of a free person.
Count this verb.
If somebody's not muted, here's my question for you. And you don't have to answer it now. If we were Ukrainian Jews and we were still in our homeland and we were celebrating Seder together, which I'm sure there will be many a Jew doing that in Ukraine. Do we recline while we're drinking? Do we recline while we're drinking? Do we see ourselves, as George Jackson wrote in Soledad Brothers, oh so many years ago, locked in jail within a jail, my mind is still free? Alice, that'll resonate as my beginning of my rabbinic career of being an Eved Hashem at Living Stage, right? So that was one of our required readings, Soledad Brother by George Jackson. Do we look at it in that manner? That this is not just a reenactment, but it is a memory. And when we remember things, we are what? We're putting pieces back together again. And so it would make sense to lean in that context. But I might also choose, I suppose, not to lean, since at this moment I'm not free. And I am oppressed. And there are those right on my doorstep who want to kill me. So I'm just wondering that. And I'm also wondering how I might even get that information, if there's Ukrainians thinking about that very question, or whether when they get to that part of the Seder, it might be something that arises for them. The children, the 4 children. Yes, Dan, did you want to say something?
I wanted to say something.
Yeah, I would. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Who's that?
It's Carol Ann.
Go ahead, Caroline.
Way back when you first started talking about it, my thinking is that no, we cannot recline. We are in a moment in our lives, whether it's from Ukraine or other things, that we can't do that. If we have freedom, we have to act on continuing to change the world. That was my reaction, that there is no choice at this point. That we might remember. I really appreciated what you said about memory, but I also thought, no, we should not be reclining.
That's very interesting, Carol Ann, because we are instructed, to rejoice in our Chagim, right? And was there rejoicing? And Reb Shlomo does talk a little bit about this and tell some stories about life in the ghetto and life in the camps and celebration of Pesach. Dan, but I don't want to go there because I want to be mindful of time.
Right, just real quick. I went back to Reb Nachman about that, and perhaps in Ukraine, you would do it the opposite way, that maybe you would recline during the first two cups to memorialize, remember as part of freedom. But then the last two cups, you don't recline because your current situation, you need to be on high alert. You can't relax. You're sort of back in, not necessarily slavery, but fear and all that. So if it reflects freedom, that's one thing. If it reflects relaxing and not being on alert, I think that's a difference.
Yeah, interesting you say that. My father used to keep a pillow on his chair to, just to lean on, and talking about relaxing, and to, it's symbolic of that very thing that you're talking about. So we're starting to come in for a landing. I found some interesting commentary on the four children. We've all, I'm sure in all of our Haggadot, we have different commentaries on the four children and how it's, each of those children. Well, this is Ba'oraita. This is not, Derabanan. The children appear in the book Sefer Shemot. These different children, and that we're supposed to tell our children the story. All right. So I'm going to share two things with you. First of all, a different take, and I thought it was kind of interesting. So travel with me here on these four children. The wise child. Who is considered wise? In 2006, 6.7% of U.S. public school children were gifted and talented. However, the percentage of white public school children was more than double the percentage of Black public school children, which was the lowest of any race ethnicity. Studies show that while white teachers are less likely to view Black students as high achieving and college bound, and more likely to expect them to drop out of school. Now, I don't know if that has changed a heck of a lot, but I do know that Renee's experience working on the other side of the Potomac in predominantly Black schools and the treatment of Black children by their Black teachers certainly has not changed very much in what this is pointing out. As we know, a lot of things haven't changed a lot. Number two, the wicked child. Who is considered wicked? Studies show that teachers of all races are more likely to punish Black children than their white counterparts. In fact, Black children are more likely to be viewed as angry, violent, and even older by white study participants. This has very real and deadly consequences, ranging from the creation of a school to prison pipeline, the physical abuse of children by school safety officers, and the murder of Black children, of course, and not just Black children, but Black children grow into Black adults. My director, I mentioned Living Stage before, Robert Alexander, you're famous for saying that schools and prisons came in together and they will go out together. And we found, since we worked a lot in both schools with predominantly Black children and prisons with predominantly Black populations, it's easy to trace the line from one place to the next. Third, the simple child. Who is considered simple? Black and Latino youth, particularly boys, are disproportionately classified as students with disabilities. They are especially likely to be classified stigmatized learning disabilities such as emotional disturbance, mental retardation, or intellectual disabilities, and some other categories, while they are underrepresented in categories like autism, speech, and language. Interesting. And lastly, and I won't read the whole thing here, the child who does not yet know how to ask, whose voices do we listen to? Are there children who don't know how to speak, or are we not listening to the words they're using? The language of our Black and brown children is often devalued. Speak English is the common rejoinder to students trying to express themselves in African American vernacular, English, Spanish, or other neo-indigenous languages. just some food for thought. You know, we all bring our prejudices with us, and as well as our desire to be whole and non-judgmental. Certainly, the Passover Seder is yet another opportunity, as we are so gifted to be given so many opportunities throughout the year in Jewish spiritual practices to really free and liberate ourselves from those kinds of things. I want to turn to Reb Shlomo, because given the yeah, that's not the page. You're right, the wicked child, right? The wicked son, the Rasha, right? The Rasha. The Rasha Mathu Omer. So what does the wicked son say? What purpose is this work to you? He says to you there by excluding himself from the public, yada, yada, yada. You know what the traditional Haggadot tell us. And then it says, Va'at va'af ata hakhei et shinav. Right? Therefore, you should blunt his teeth. My father of blessed memory used to talk about how, sitting at the Seder table, he always put the twins, my father and his brother, on opposite sides, because if they acted out, he was that close to get a zetz, right? To have his teeth blunted. Now, I never liked his story about that. I don't like what the abuse that is that I'm reading into this, that the father basically smacks the kid in the mouth. Listen to Reb Shlomo's take on this. He says there's a deeper explanation by the Alexander Rebbe. Oh, wait a second. No, sorry. It's a Belzer. This is the Rebbe, Belzer Rebbe. The Haggadah says, when you talk to the wicked son to blunt his teeth, Shlomo says it's a little heartbreaking. He came to the Seder after all. He didn't have to come at all. Now, the word Rasha, wicked, is made up of 3 letters. What are they, anybody? Shin, right? I mean, Resh, Shin, Ayin, right? Resh, Shin, Ayin. The outside letters are Resh and Ayin, which means Ra, right? Bad or evil, dark side. But the inside letter is a Shin. And what does that mean? The 3 lines that make up a Shin symbolize Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. If the Shin with its 3 lines is on the inside of the Rasha, that's to tell you that every Jew in the world is connected to their forefathers, right? To our ancestry. His inside, his neshama, is connected to them. So we tell the father, blunt his teeth. Shinav. Hey, shinav. Blunt his shinav. Shin al shalo, or shin alav. Blunt his shin. If you want to educate this boy, knock his shin loose from the rest of him. Bring out his inner nature that's connected with the Father's. Give him courage. Tell him not to make you think that he's not holy, because you know that he really is holy. It's a very typical Shlomo teaching, is it not? And he gets it from the Belzer Rebbe. I like that. I like that because it's a reminder that we all need to be reminded of who we are and where we've came from and what we're leaving behind. So I'm going to pause for another moment because there's one last.
With the Buccaneers now.
Why, Judy? I thought
That
somebody
wasn't me.
said something.
No, he's with the Buccaneers now, the Tampa Bay.
So there was a lot we didn't cover, obviously, but I hope that what we did cover tonight gives you some ideas for your Seder, questions, songs, videos. I was playing with the idea of maybe showing these videos at the Seder, but nah, I decided not to. But we got to enjoy them together. There's actually one that I didn't share with you that I had ready to go. Or another Dayenu for the Maccabees. So if you want to Google that, you can find that as well. So, Chag Sameach, everybody. Reb Levi Yitzchak Berditchev used to say that before Purim, that you should have a kasher at Purim and a Simchadik Pesach, a Zisla Pesach. Right. So he kind of spun it around, because usually what you say is you have a kosher Pesach and a Freilichen Purim, right? So, why did he say that? He said because when you get so drunk on Purim, you might forget to keep kosher. So you have a kosher in Purim and a freilichen Pesach, because on Pesach you might get so bogged down with all that cleaning and all the preparation that you might forget to have a joyous ivdu et Hashem b'simcha, and samachta fagecha, and rejoice in our festivals. So I pray that Friday night is a joyous occasion, whether you are with a few on Zoom or whether we are with 62 people like the Glazer Wieners. No matter how many people, I hope it's meaningful, and I hope it's yummy, and I expect a report as to whether or not you used any of these teachings or anything new that came up that you can share with me, because God knows I've got a lot to learn too. Thank you all for joining us on this Wednesday night. And maybe I'll leave you, unless anybody has the last word. I'll leave you with the Maccabees singing Dayenu. Because if we'd only had this night, Dayenu, but we'll have this Shabbos too. Yes, we are meeting this Shabbat morning. And the following Shabbat morning we'll be meeting as well, and that will be, also include Yizkor. Alrighty, so thank you all very, very much. You know that you enrich my life in ways, more ways than can be counted, and I treasure each and every one of you. Here is a last treat.